Joining me now is someone who I'm sure has a lot of thoughts on that, Senator Adam Schiff of California, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who is, of course, in that hearing with Todd Blanche today. So I just gave some highlights there. You were in the hearing pressing him today. What did you think of Todd Blanche's performance?
Well, I think the central question the senators had for him, he didn't answer very well, and that is, who do you represent? Do you represent the American people as the Attorney General is supposed to, or do you represent Donald Trump? Are you still his criminal defense lawyer? And he has made it very clear he is still the president's lawyer. He signs this settlement agreement, which a judge just said was basically collusion and a fraud and just a pretense of some kind of a court proceeding to give a patina of respectability to something absolutely devoid of that. He's made it clear that he will go after the president's enemies. He's made it clear that he believes the president has not only the right, but the duty to go after his adversaries and abuse the Justice Department to do it. So he has basically made it clear he is there to be an instrument of Donald Trump's will, to protect him, use the law as a shield to protect him, and also as a sword to go after his enemies.
The IRS settlement is one of the things that you pressed him on today. And again, I know everybody's been following this very closely. You just mentioned it, too. But it's, of course, the IRS settlement that gives Trump, his family members, their companies and affiliated individuals protection from audits, which is the key part here, part of the key part here. You also went back and forth with him about his inherent conflict of interest, of course, as a Trump lawyer directing one arm of the executive branch to settle with another arm. Do you feel anything was resolved there? I'm sure you have many remaining questions, but what are they at this point?
Well, one thing I'd like to know is who wrote this agreement? Who wrote this tax giveaway for the president? I asked Blanche about it. It's his name that signed it. He couldn't tell us who wrote it. Now, he said he assumed it was written by a Department of Justice lawyer or an IRS lawyer. But actually, when you look at the terms of it, it is so favorable to Donald Trump. You might surmise that it was actually written by his attorney, the person who is joined in filing the suit, the person who has now been referred to the Florida Bar Association by that judge in Miami for potential disciplinary proceedings. That judge also referred Todd Blanche to the New York bar. But we don't know who wrote this thing. We don't know why Todd Blanche was the only one who signed it. The agreement from the day before was signed also by someone from the IRS and someone else from the Justice Department. But this alone had Todd Blanche's signature. So he's taken full ownership of this at one level, and at another wants to deny any responsibility. I don't know who wrote this thing.
I know you've mentioned the referral to the New York bar, which is really interesting for people out there who are just tuning into this. What could happen next? Could anything happen next with his law license, or what should we expect?
Yes, New York could take his law license away, his ability to practice before the New York bar. It's one of the reasons why the Justice Department is trying to go after bar associations. They don't want anyone to be able to hold them to account. But when you take an oath before the bar, when you're sworn into the bar, you take an oath to practice law ethically, and judges can refer you to the Bar Association for an investigation when you don't. And here, the judge was very explicit in very harsh language you don't often see, in saying that basically this lawsuit by Trump was fraudulent to begin with. It's notable that the president didn't file this lawsuit against the IRS when he was a private citizen. No, he waited until he became president again. And even though the statute of limitations had passed, the department didn't defend itself, didn't even assert the statute of limitations. That's how frivolous and false this sham of an agreement was. It was basically Trump agreeing with Trump not to assert any defenses against Trump's suit against Trump.
It is quite a thing. Every time I talk about it, it still blows my mind because it's just so ludicrous it's happening. I know I was a little bit struck. I'm not naive. You always bring me back down to earth, too, when I get a little optimistic. But I was a little struck by Cornyn's questioning during the hearing. He pushed him a bit during the hearing. What are you hearing, if anything, from your Republican colleagues about Blanche's testimony today?
Well, look, I think they made it clear during the hearing, some of them, that they had concerns in particular about the tax, inside deal, the self-dealing instance between the president and the IRS and his lawyers. So there's been expressions of concern, but Jenna, I will say we've seen lots of expressions of concern by my Republican colleagues, not just on the committee, but off the committee as well. And those expressions of concern aren't always followed by actual votes that really hold the administration to account. Now, I hope this is the exception. I hope that the concerns that were expressed today, and Senator Cornyn brought up the fact that Blanche purported to kill the slush fund on his own. If this was truly a negotiation between two different parties, as they claim, one party can't simply renounce a deal that was given to the other party, unless, in fact, Blanche was on both sides of that deal, which is really what took place here. But Cornyn seemed troubled by it. He should be troubled by it. I hope that Tillis is troubled by it. I hope that Tillis is troubled by the fact that Blanche went before CPAC, this conservative convention, and bragged about firing all of the prosecutors and all the FBI agents that worked on any investigation involving his client, Donald Trump.
I hope they're concerned enough to actually vote where their concern is, but we will certainly see. We will not hold our breath here. I know you were obviously in that hearing grilling Blanche, so you were not paying attention, or you were not consuming in the same way the hearing with Jay Clayton, but you're the former ranking member on the House Intel Committee. You've expressed concern in the past about Jay Clayton's lack of intelligence background for this role. One of the things that I think is interesting that some Democrats have raised is that Jay Clayton might be a better option than Pulte, given Pulte is clearly under the kind of eye or under the control of Trump and is clearly pushing his conspiracies. Where do you come down on that? And have you made a decision about where you're going to vote on Jay Clayton?
Well, look, what they do is they set the bar so low, like Pulte, this real estate guy, kind of a buffoon, really. They set the bar at Pulte. Isn't anyone better than Pulte? Shouldn't we just jump at Clayton because he's not Pulte? Clayton has very little experience. And as you saw today during the hearing, he couldn't even answer a basic question that would have required him to speak truth to power. He couldn't say who won the election because he knows Donald Trump doesn't want him to say that. If he can't say who won the election in 2020, how can we count on Jay Clayton to give it straight to the president, to Congress, when the intelligence might contradict what the president prefers? I mean, let's say there's intelligence that Iran is cheating on this deal, but the president doesn't want to believe it because he's telling the public something otherwise. We need the Director of National Intelligence to both level the president, say, sir, I'm sorry, but we have strong intelligence the Iranians are cheating. Here's what it looks like. Here's our degree of confidence in it. We need them to brief Congress this way. And what we saw with Tulsi Gabbard is a willingness to manipulate the intelligence, to basically tell an intelligence council, no, I don't like that conclusion, rewrite it, and fire people who won't. That is the worst thing you could ask for in a director of intelligence. Clayton gave us no confidence that he would be any different than Gabbard.
This is where we are today. We're going to keep talking about this. We're also going to show that those clips you just mentioned of him being unable to answer that particular question after the break. But Senator Adam Schiff, thank you as always for joining us tonight.